as punctual and prompt as I can be with these ceremonies. It's such an honor to have you all here this morning on this beautiful, beautiful Michigan day. It's so nice to see your smiling and lovely faces. This has been some 14 months for us, and in fact, this is the first Save the Flags event that we've been able to have since the start of the pandemic. So we're starting out back into this program with a bang, I think, and I just so appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules to be here this morning. I'm Matt Van Acker. I have the honor of serving as the director of the Michigan State Tour Guide Education and Information Service. And for the past 25 years or so, I've had the unique pleasure, and it has been a pleasure, of serving as a task force member, chair, co-chair, and curator of an incredible project called Save the Flags. The goal of our project is to properly care for a truly amazing collection of 240 battle flags, beautiful battle flags, fragile battle flags, incredible artifacts that were carried by our proud Michigan soldiers in the American Civil War, the Spanish-American War, and World War I. In fact, the flags were originally held within the walls of this beautiful building. It serves as an incredible backdrop for us this morning. We actually have some replicas of some of the original battle flags that are on display at the top part of the building portico there. It gives you an idea of what these flags, these original flags, look like. These flags, by the way, were donated to our project by reenactment groups across Michigan in a really wonderful ceremony we held right here 6 years ago. What's interesting about the replica flags that you see there is that many of these flags were actually on the same battlefields that the original flags were. These reenactors would actually go out to the battlefields, and they took their flags with them. These flags were exposed to the same elements that the original flags were exposed to. So they've literally seen action in the battlefields. The only difference is they weren't shot at with actual mini balls as the originals were. This building was built in part to serve as a fitting and fireproof place to display the battle flags that our proud Michigan soldiers had carried with them in the recently ended Civil War. In fact, our Capitol and the grounds that it rests upon originally were conceived to serve as a fitting reminder, a memorial to the sacrifices that Michigan made during the Civil War. We're here today to honor several individuals for their incredibly generous support of this project. Mr. Maurice Imhoff, the late Douglas Marsh, and his wife Rose Marsh, who's here today with us this morning. Their donation of $1,000 in honor of the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry Regiment will assist us in conserving not only the flags that these proud, brave black volunteers carried into combat, but the entire collection. I'd like to introduce, to start our ceremony, my colleague and co-curator of the Save the Flags collection, Ms. Cambray Sampson.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tried to get her to sing the national anthem, but that was a no-go, so maybe next time, huh? We're blessed to have numerous friends of Save the Flags who are here with us this morning. Our honored guest, Mr. Maurice Imhoff. And Mrs. Rose Marsh, who's here to honor her late husband, Mr. Doug Marsh. I want to add also that Rose was kind enough to wear a dress that she had made actually for a trip that we were supposed to take to Gettysburg together. So I had to do a little arm twisting to get her to agree to wear the period dress today. And we're so pleased to have you here. The Honorable Julie Alexander, Michigan State Representative, District 64, which includes Jackson, Michigan, where Maurice lives. Representative Alexander, thank you for being here. We have Michigan State Capitol Commissioners, which oversee our Capitol building and the Save the Flags project, Mr. Bill Candler. Thank you, Bill. We also have our Executive Director of the Michigan State Capitol Commission, and my friend, Mr. Rob Blackshaw, who's here too. A little bit later, Mr. John Truscott, also a State Capitol Commissioner, will be joining us also. I have a Save the Flags Task Force member who's way in back. What are you doing back there, David? My friend and fellow colleague with Save the Flags, Mr. David Downing, who's here actually in period uniform of a medical officer, actually. Mr. Downing, he's probably going to not like me for making him the spotlight, but Dave's family was the first family to step forward to adopt a flag in this collection. That was number one. This ceremony honors number 187, and Dave's family stepped forward. Dave is a direct descendant of Corporal Walter Mundell, who fought with the 3rd and 5th Michigan Volunteer Infantry Regiments. Corporal Mundell was awarded the Medal of Honor for gallantry in action and capturing a Confederate flag at the Battle of Sailor's Creek, almost at the very end of the Civil War. So we're very honored to have David here representing Corporal Mundell and representing Save the Flags. Mr. Jacob Sneed, if you'd step forward. And we also have 2 other reenactors who have stepped forward to help us honor this special tribute today. And Jacob is actually Maurice's cousin. And you can see them in period uniform. And it's a hot day for wool, gentlemen. We really appreciate you being here this morning. I'd also like to introduce Capitol educators. You met Cambray Sampson and my colleague May Euler, who's also serving as a curator of this collection. Guests, families, Capitol staff, volunteers, Save the Flag supporters, and honored guests. The 1860 census of the state of Michigan listed her population at approximately 750,000 citizens. 5 years later, by the spring of 1865, the old peninsular state had sent over 90,000 of her father's sons and brothers to the bloody battlefields of the Civil War. This constituted one of the largest contributions of any northern state based on its population. To put this to you another way, this figure constituted 50%, 1/2 of our eligible male population. Could you even begin to fathom a similar contribution by today's standards of modern warfare if 1/2 of our eligible population was off fighting in that war? I don't think our citizens would put up with such a sacrifice, but back then enlistments were encouraged. We sent 30 regiments of infantry, 11 regiments of cavalry, 14 light artillery batteries. 2 of the replica cannons that one of these batteries, the Loomis battery, used to great effect during the war are displayed here and flanking the entries to our capital. We sent a regiment each of engineers and mechanics and sharpshooters. Their monuments grace our lawns on the far corners of the Capitol lawn. And especially for today's ceremony, we are here to honor the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry Regiment, the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops. Before leaving for the fields of battle, the men of these regiments were presented with beautiful silken flags. Typically, the regiments would receive what was referred to as a stand of colors. They would receive the national, the red, white, and blue flag that we're all very familiar with, and also what was called a regimental, which was a dark blue flag, not too unlike our current state flag, sometimes having the state coat of arms on it, more often than not having the symbol of the federal government, the eagle with outstretched wings. The flags quite often were presented to the men of these regiments by the ladies of the communities from which they had come in incredible, well-attended ceremonies. Literally thousands of people would turn out for these flag presentation ceremonies to see their boys march off to war under the banners that had been specially made for them. The flags had mottos on them. orders, if you will, to the men of these regiments that they would follow in combat. Injure vincimus, we conquer in right, 4th Michigan Cavalry Regiment. Do your duty, 6th Michigan Infantry, Heavy Artillery Regiment. These mottos were actually painted or hand embroidered on the flags. Every time the men looked at that flag, it was a reminder of from where they had come and for what they were fighting for. From the ladies of Adrian to the 4th Michigan, simply defend it. At her country's sacred call, her patriot sons will peril all. 2nd Michigan Infantry Regiment, one of my favorites. We come to war not on opinions, but to suppress treason. 14th Michigan Infantry Regiment, fear not death, fear dishonor. 6th Michigan Cavalry Regiment. And the motto on the flag that is being adopted today, all men are born free and equal to realize which we fight. This bears repeating. This is a flag carried by the 1st Michigan Volunteer Colored Infantry Regiment, later redesignated as the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops. All men are born free and equal to realize which we fight. These flags stood for everything the men were fighting for. The colors stood for country, for community, for family, and for the Union. A quick side note to this story. The organization of Civil War regiments, not only in Michigan, but in all of the states, North and South, it's important to understand the community connection that these men had. Regiments formed in congressional districts. Companies of the regiments formed in very specific communities in small towns. These men knew each other. There were brothers, there were fathers, in some cases grandfathers, that were fighting alongside the other men of their family, cousins, boys that you had gone to school with and fidgeted in Sunday worship with. These are men that knew each other. They were related to each other. The 24th Michigan that formed out of Wayne County, 1,000 men in that regiment, 135 pairs of brothers in that single regiment. Over a quarter of the regiment composed of brothers, including Henry Ford's 2 uncles, John and Barney Littagott. The point I'm trying to make is that these flags were a direct link to the communities that they had come from. They were a constant reminder, as I mentioned earlier, of what they were fighting for. The flags also served a very important role logistically on the battlefields of the war. They obviously couldn't pull out their cell phones and text each other their position on the battlefield. They had to have a marker so the men knew that they were in their proper alignment. The colonel of the regiment, if he needed his regiment to advance, would give the orders to the color bearers, the men who were carrying the flags. As those flags went forward, the men of the regiment would follow in advance. If he needed his regiment to retreat, the order would be given to the flag bearer and they would move back. If that flag bearer took his staff out of the holster that he used to carry it with, and he planted that staff in the ground, every single man of the regiment knew that was their order to defend that battle flag and their regiment's position to the very last man, if necessary. Incredible acts of bravery and courage took place around the colors because the Confederate forces that we were up against recognized what's the easiest and quickest way to dishearten a Union regiment. You drop the man who's carrying the colors. If that flag goes down, you'll have a whole regiment in disarray, not really knowing what they were supposed to do. So almost unbelievable acts of sacrifice took place around these colors. 3 days ago, President Joe Biden presented the Medal of Honor to Colonel Ralph Puckett for conspicuous gallantry during the Korean War. The very first medals of honor were awarded during the Civil War, most often for the capture of a Confederate battle flag or in defense of Union flags. 69 men from the state of Michigan were awarded the Medal of Honor for gallantry around the colors and for capturing Confederate flags. Conspicuous gallantry as was displayed by the men of the 102nd USCT. January 5th, 1864, the Colored Ladies' Aid Society of Detroit presented to the regiment a beautiful flag. The flag was one of several flags carried by the regiment during the course of the war. It was a regimental with a field of blue emblazoned with a federal eagle with outstretched wings. Beautifully painted upon the banner at the fore was the inscription, "All men are born free and equal, to realize which we fight." The flag was hand-painted by Detroit artist Robert Hopkin of the firm Leibel, Wright and Hopkin. 3 years later, another of the firm's partners, William Wright, executed the 9 acres of decorative artwork in our state capitol. The 1st Michigan Colored Troops suffered many degradations that were common among black troops during the war. The regiment was commanded by white officers only. They were paid less than white soldiers. Black soldiers earned $10 per month with a $3 deduction for clothing, while the white privates were paid $13 a month with an extra $3 stipend for clothing. In addition, white soldiers in the last years of the war earned enlistment bonuses up to several $100s. Black soldiers were given none. The black troops were consistently housed in substandard barracks, often in former pigsties or dwellings open to the elements. Their rations, equipment were woefully lacking, and initially they were only used for non-combat manual labor in digging trenches, constructing roads, fortifications, and destroying Confederate railroads. Black soldiers were also often given no quarter upon capture or surrender. By order of the Confederate Congress, captured black soldiers were to be returned to their former masters or turned over to the Confederate state authorities and were subjected to the rules and the laws of that state, which most often meant summarial execution. Despite all of this, perhaps one of the most painful degradations that these proud, brave black boys from Michigan suffered was the loss of their state designation, as black regiments were federalized and were not permitted to keep their state designations. The 1st Michigan Colored Troops was redesignated as the 102nd United States Colored Troops, making the 102nd the only Michigan regiment to lose their state identity. The men of the 102nd suffered largely in silence. In 1864, the regiment was finally given the opportunity to fight. The following account was drawn from an unnamed correspondent of the fight of the 102nd at the Battle of Honey Hills, South Carolina in December of 1864. Quote, "On one side of our little detail of 300 men, the 54th Massachusetts Colored was drawn up. On the other side, a white regiment, the 127th New York. Here our forces sustained a charge from the enemy and charged in turn. In this affair, the 102nd covered themselves in glory. It is acknowledged without stint on all hands that our regiment maintained the steadfast line of battle and fought with the greatest determination of any troops on the ground. Numerous accounts were given of soldiers being grievously wounded, shot through and through, and still refusing to leave the line of battle. The regiment would eventually lose almost 10% of their strength from disease, wounds, and those killed in action. At the conclusion of the war, these battle-scarred and bullet-torn flags that the men of the 102nd had carried with them, along with the other regiments, were returned to a grateful state by the men who had carried them and had fought under them in a grand ceremony at Detroit on July 4th, 1866. In accepting the flags, Michigan's Governor Henry Crapo pledged, quote, "They will not be forgotten and their histories left unwritten. Let us tenderly deposit them as sacred relics in the archives of our state, there to stand forever, her proudest possession." According to Crapo, the flags were mementos of friends lost and as a country saved. This is the promise that we are now keeping with this ceremony today and this generous support. With the restoration of our Capitol about 30 years ago, the flags were removed from the rotunda cases where they had been allowed to deteriorate due to fluctuating temperatures and humidity, almost constant exposure to natural and artificial light, and the effects of gravity itself on the flags. The flags are now housed at the State Historical Center here in Lansing in a specially designed and controlled archival storage space. Their elements of their destruction have been eliminated, and the flags that need further care are being sent out to some of our nation's leading textile conservators. This is a proud moment for me to be here at this ceremony, but also a very proud moment for what the coming year will bring for this collection. With the construction of our new Heritage Hall and my grateful support of our commission, our new Heritage Hall will be including a state-of-the-art conservation laboratory, and for the first time, we'll actually be able to conduct on-site conservation in the flag's original home right here in the state capitol in our Heritage Hall. This is a huge step for our project, and one that would not be possible were it not for the generous support that we're honoring today. And so the stories of the flags have come full circle, and starting here in this building in 1879 and coming back to the Capitol now. It's now my honor to introduce to you again the Honorable State Representative Julie Alexander, the 64th District. If we could have Maurice and Rose, if you could step forward also, please. Representative Alexander has some special presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. What an appropriate, most appropriate opening when we give our Pledge of Allegiance to our United States flag. The flags are truly symbolic, and today is a very special day for many reasons. We acknowledge those who truly make a difference. As a state legislator serving the 64th District in Jackson County, it is my honor to be a part of today's recognition. To begin with, I would like to present a special tribute to Mr. Douglas Marsh. This tribute will be shared with his beloved wife, Rose. Let it be known that it is with shared commitment to the noble ideas of our country that we salute the late Douglas Marsh. As this loyal and unselfish individual is honored for his dedication to our veterans and preserving their history, as friends, family, and Michiganders gather to commend this patriotic historian, we proudly add our own thanks for the contributions he has made in keeping alive the memory of our cherished heroes. Douglas Marsh is a descendant of Corporal Charles Marsh, who served with the 4th Michigan Volunteer Cavalry Regiment in the Civil War. The 4th Michigan was recruited from various parts of the state and mustered into service at Detroit in August of 1862. The 4th had been on the field for over 2 years when the ladies of Flint sent a magnificent flag as a gift to their regiment. On the front of the flag was the motto, Injure Vencimus, we conquer in right, and on the reverse was painted the Michigan's coat of arms. The flag bears the names of 40 battles in which the 4th Cavalry participated. It was a detachment of the 4th Michigan Cavalry that captured the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, and as he was attempting to escape to Mexico at the end of the war. Douglas Marsh has played an integral role securing funding and supporting the Save the Flag programs in partnership with the Michigan State Capitol. The donation of $1,000 will help ensure that historic battle flags carried by Michigan volunteers are appropriately preserved, researched, and displayed for future generations to learn from and cherish. His generosity has allowed Save the Flags to adopt a flag carried by the 102nd U.S. Colored Infantry Regiment. This tribute honors the memory of Douglas Marsh, along with the memory of the proud, brave Black men who fought beneath this flag. Following his passing in 2014, his wife, Rose, continued to generously support Save the Flags and even donated a replica flag to the collection. Through his work with Save the Flags program, Douglas Marsh has set an example to put our love of country to good use in preserving the history of those who came before us. We all benefit from the patriotism of a man like Douglas Marsh. This tribute also honors the wives, the sweethearts, the mothers, the fathers, and the families of the boys in blue left behind here in Michigan. In special tribute, therefore, this document is signed and dedicated to honor the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops and commend Douglas Marsh as he is recognized for excellence in service to Michigan's veterans. Again, his beloved wife, Rose. For those that do not know me, I repeat, I am honored to be serving as a state legislator here in the 101st state legislature. Being a resident of Jackson County, we have a strong historical perspective there. Birthplace of the Republican Party, a strong understanding of the importance the Underground Railroads played in our history. To recognize someone as unique as Maurice makes me very proud. As a mother and a grandma, I know I would truly be proud having a son with this passion, dedication, and willingness to serve. But I'm also a former educator. I've spent 22 years in the classroom working with adults and middle schoolers. I've seen thousands of young people, and Maurice, you stand above and beyond. I am so excited to see what your future will entail. So, the state of Michigan, special tribute to Maurice. Let it be known that it is with deep appreciation for his hard work and leadership that we congratulate Maurice Imhoff of Jackson in recognition of his dedication and service to the preservation of our state's history. His accomplishments signify qualities that are very much admired by the people of the state and as an indication of the talent and industriousness that will be valued and appreciated by our state and nation for many years to come. Maurice has taken full advantage of the opportunities presented to him to preserve our state's rich history of service, sacrifice, and adopting responsibility in the face of difficult challenges. As an avid historian, Maurice spends his time as a reenactor with the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops, USCT. In 2014, former state senator Coleman Young of Detroit introduced a bill to rename a portion of Highway I-375 in Wayne County as the 102nd USCT Memorial Highway. In 2015, former Governor Rick Snyder signed the bill into law. However, the signs unfortunately never manifested due to the lack of funding. Years later, Maurice, a student at Northwest High School in Jackson County, became aware of this unfunded memorial and simply took action. Using a GoFundMe campaign as well as starting a Facebook page, don't you love technology and social media, he was able to raise the full amount of $3,200 in less than 2 years. Finally, on March 28th, just recently, 2021, the highway signs were officially recognized with a ceremony. A dedicated portion of the highway is nearly the same spot where the 1,400-man regiment was born in 1864. The document goes on to give more information in detail, and I will conclude with, In special tribute, therefore, this document is signed and dedicated to congratulate and extend our deepest gratitude to Maurice Imhoff. Michigan is in good hands with the next generation filled with individuals like you. We are grateful for your service and look forward to continuing the excellent efforts in all aspects of life. As with the earlier tribute to Mrs. Marsh, this document is signed by State Representative Sarah Leitner, myself, State Representative Julie Alexander, and the Senate Majority Leader, your Senator, Mike Shirkey. And one last thing before I leave. With the theme today of flags, and listening to the eloquent opening Mr. Van Acker offered on the importance of flags. They are truly symbolic. They ground us. They also fly and they soar. I am excited to share with you that I have an item for you. The Michigan flag that I am about to present to you was flown over the Capitol, Michigan State Capitol, today on May 24th, right above us earlier this morning before the service began. The reason that this is important to acknowledge is just as our flags rise and soar, I look forward to watch you do the same. Thank you for your service and all you do.
Thank you so much, Representative Alexander. I missed one introduction earlier. I wanted to make sure to make a note that we're joined today also by former state representative and Senator Glenn Anderson, a current commissioner for Wayne County, and also a friend and supporter of Maurice. And Senator Anderson, when he served in the legislature, was a very big supporter of our flag project and turned out for events in his district to honor similarly people who have supported Save the Flags through the years. It's now my honor to introduce my friend David Downing. If you would come up, sir. And I mentioned earlier, Dave is a descendant of Walter Mundell, who fought with the 3rd and the 5th Michigan Volunteer Infantry Regiment, and also a gentleman who was awarded the Medal of Honor. Dave is going to be presenting Maurice and Rose with the special tribute. All yours, sir.
Thank you. The special tribute is given to adopters of flags throughout the years. I have one hanging in my office. It reads, Mr. Maurice Imhoff and the late Mr. Douglas Marsh and the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops that the certificate is honoring. Let it be known that it is an honor and a privilege to pay tribute to Mr. Maurice Imhoff and the late Mr. Douglas Marsh for their adoption of the flag carried by the 102nd U.S. Colored Infantry during the Civil War, and to commemorate the honor and bravery and sacrifice of the 102nd. Mr. Maurice Imhoff and the late Mr. Douglas Marsh's donation of $1,000 will ensure that the historic battle flags carried by Michigan volunteers are appropriately preserved, researched, and displayed for future generations to learn from and to cherish. The flag being adopted as part of the Michigan Capitol Battle Flag Collection, numbering 240 banners, including flags from the Civil War, Spanish-American War, and World War I. As part of the Save the Flags project to preserve the state's collection of historic battle flags, groups, individuals, or families may adopt a flag by contributing to its preservation. The donation will ensure that the history of the men of the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops who fought and died courageously under these banners will also be preserved. Mr. Imhoff raised the funds for his adoption in conjunction with his participation in the 102nd United States Colored Troops Company C Reenactor Organization. The organization fosters and preserves the history of the American Civil War, enhancing the public understanding of Michigan's African American contributions in the conflict through historically accurate reenactments, camp demonstrations, military drills, patrols, memorial ceremonies, and civilian activities. Mr. Imhoff's support of preserving history also included raising substantial funds to commission 2 highway signs in Detroit that designated a portion of the I-375, the 102nd USCT Memorial Highway. The late Mr. Douglas Marsh was a descendant of Corporal Charles C. Marsh, who fought with the 4th Michigan Volunteer Cavalry. Mr. Marsh was a friend and active supporter of Save the Flags, which his wife has generously contributed to support since his untimely passing. This tribute honors his memory along with the memory of the proud, brave black men who fought beneath the flag. On February 17, 1864, the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry Regiment was mustered into federal service. They would eventually be designated the 102nd Regiment United States Colored Troops. The soldiers served on picket duty, built fortifications, and destroyed enemy railroads in Florida and South Carolina. Initially channeled into non-combatant roles, black soldiers quickly became involved in battles. Adjutant General John Robertson offers this account from an unnamed correspondent of the 102nd at the Battle of Honey Hill in South Carolina, December 1864. On one side of our little detail of 300 men, the 54th Massachusetts Colored was drawn up, and on the other side, a white regiment, the 127th New York, where our forces sustained a charge from the enemy and charged in turn. In this affair, the 102nd covered themselves in glory. It is acknowledged without stint on all hands that our regiment maintained the steadfast line of battle and fought within the greatest determination of any troops on the ground. In special tribute, therefore, this document is signed and dedicated to honor the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops, as well as to express our gratitude to Mr. Maurice Imhoff and the late Mr. Douglas Marsh for their support of Save the Flags. By adopting the flag, they are fulfilling an obligation to help preserve the memory of those Michigan Civil War veterans who fought to save the Union from 1861 to 1865. The noble veterans of the 102nd U.S. Colored Infantry Regiment will be proud of this effort to preserve their past. And it is signed by Garland Gilchrist, Lieutenant Governor, and Gretchen Whitmer, Governor of the state of Michigan. So if we could have Mr. Imhoff and Ms. Marsh come up to accept the tribute. Matt? Okay.
I need to tell you all that Rose has been a reluctant participant in all this attention being drawn to her, as has Maurice also. They sort of came into this kicking and screaming a little bit. But these events are important to honor these people, but also to promote this project and bring public awareness of it. I'd also like to introduce now, if I could, the Honorable Bill Candler, Michigan State Capitol Commissioner, and I don't believe John Truscott is here yet. Commissioner Anderson, could I impose on you to come up and help present 2 photographs to Rose and Maurice? These are actually photographs of the flag that they've helped conserve and preserve, and you can take a peek at them. You can see, sadly, this whole central portion of the flag was beautifully hand painted. The sad thing about the paint is it added rigidity to the silk, so we tended to see a lot of loss in the painted areas, and you can see the central portion of this flag is literally fallen out through the years, and I'm hoping that one of you has it in a trunk somewhere, or maybe in your barn or in your basement, and you may not even realize what you have. So, and in all seriousness, if you ever run across a piece of silk in a trunk or in a diary or a Bible that's connected to the Civil War, chances are pretty good you have a piece of an original battle flag. So don't discard it, please. Hopefully one of you will step forward with the missing portion of this flag. I'll let you gentlemen take over. If Maurice and Rose, if you could come up again, please.
Good morning. It's still morning, so make sure it wasn't afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for showing up here. My name is Bill Candler, and as Matt mentioned, I'm a member of the Michigan State Capitol Commission. And on behalf of the Capitol Commission, we appreciate all the efforts of everybody here in the, first of all, in participating in the Save the Flags program and for being here today. I especially appreciate what Maurice has done to honor the 102nd USCT. And this is a year, a period of time when we're supposedly going through a racial reckoning. Who knows how long that will go, but it's important that things like these kinds of topics are brought to our attention. We start to learn our entire history, our whole history, because it's not just black history, it's American history. It's all part of the American culture, American story. We need to know all of it. Hopefully this will help going forward to help people know more about all these things. And Maurice, this is certainly a tribute to the state capital, the state of Michigan, but actually to the United States of America, to the ideal of America, to bring this story forward to everybody. So thank you so much for that. Here's one of your pictures.
Well, good, still good morning. So I wanted to say I was surprised, and I appreciate Matt including me and giving me an opportunity to say a few words. Rose, I know it's a bittersweet moment since your husband's not here with us. But I wanted to express my appreciation, and as Matt had mentioned, I was supportive when I was in the legislature of the preservation of the flags, and we ran into each other in one of the middle schools in my district in Livonia when I was there. And I was there and heard about it, and Matt and I saw what he was doing with some of the schools, at the elementary schools, the middle schools, and getting students involved in the preservation of flags and the importance of it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here today. I won't tell you how fast I drove coming up here to get from Westland, but I didn't want to miss it, and I was glad that I had a little bit of time to spare. But Rose, if I could present this to you, thank you for what you've done. Maurice, you guys have switched them off. Okay, so I'll present this one to Maurice on behalf of Rose, and we will proceed. I thank you very much for all you've done, both of you, and what your husband did, Rose, as well, certainly, for the preservation of these important flags. And I know the cannons that were, I believe it was towards the end of my term in the Senate, that work began on getting the cannons replaced, and it's very incredible to see that preservation of history, and I wanted to thank you both for recognizing how important that is. Thank you.
Don't sit down quite yet. That hoop skirt, it looks like that's quite an ordeal, sitting and getting up. So, I thank you, Commissioners Candler and Anderson, for that fine presentation. I'd like to reintroduce my co-curator, May Euler, who has a special presentation for Rose.
Thank you so much for all your contributions to Save the Flag, your husband's contributions as well. We appreciate your support so much.
Maurice got the flag, Rose got the flowers. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Maurice Imhoff.
I'm going to keep it brief. It's a little hot outside. But I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for coming out today. It's highly important. It's also highly important that we recognize Michigan's historic preservation with the battle flags. But the one special that I adopted was Michigan's first and only African-American regiment from Michigan, the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry, aka the 102nd USCT. This was a big unit, 1,400 men. And as I mentioned, the only unit from Michigan that was African-American. And mind you, this is the end of the Underground Railroad, of course. So you had a lot of escaped slaves who had fought in this. So it was a whole different purpose for these men, highly important for these men. So it's important that we honor and recognize these guys going forward and make sure that their history is not forgotten. That's one thing I wanted to do with the highway signs and preserving the flags. And now when people go in Detroit, they'll drive down IC-375 and they'll see that sign and go, who is the 102nd USCT? And it brings that story to life, because otherwise there might be people who have never really known about the 102nd. And now they have the opportunity to when they go by and see those things, and to hear of the preservation done here in Lansing, which is really important. And they faced a lot of difficulties going forward. So many stories I can tell, in this regiment that they went through. So they had a lot of challenges. Speaking of which, when they went to D.C., when they first arrived in Maryland there, it was pouring really bad and raining. And they had requested to use some of the barracks nearby, and they were denied because they were afraid it would arouse some of the white soldiers. But they persevered. They went on and fought with distinction, did not lose a single engagement. Michigan's one and only African-American regiment, which the country thought first that they wouldn't even be able to fight. They went on and did not lose a single engagement. That says a lot for Michigan's history and for Michigan's African-American history as well. But also, speaking of, remembering history, just not too far from here in Mason, Michigan, there are 3 African-American men lynched in the state of Michigan, one of which was John Taylor, who was a veteran of the 102nd USCT. And stories like him, need to be told. There just was a historical marker installed at the park not too long ago off Cedar Street that tells the story of John Taylor. But stories like his that need to be told, and recognized here in the state of Michigan. That's one thing that I wanted to do with preserving the battle flags. So thank you again for everyone coming out today. I hope you'll take the time to go and study on some of Michigan's Civil War history and to maybe contribute to the collection yourself. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Does the passage of the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, the decades, or even the centuries diminish the sacrifice of these proud men and their families who gave so much to end the scourge of slavery in this land and to preserve our fragile union? Does the physical distance from the great shores of Michigan to those battlefields afar diminish the loss? I argue it does not, and it should not. Let us go forth then today from this ceremony with grateful hearts for the generous support offered by Mr. Maurice Imhoff, the late Douglas Marsh, and Mrs. Rose Marsh. Let us go forth today also newly committed to remembering the sacrifices of the 1st Michigan Volunteer Colored Infantry Regiment, and newly committed to caring for these priceless artifacts of their service. This is a great day to be a Michigander. Thank you all so very much for coming out this morning.